The orc girl appeared in the quarry village on a morning when frost still clung to the stone, and Yoren Caldwell noticed her because she walked directly up to the cutting site without hesitation, without the usual wariness strangers showed around flying chips and swinging hammers. She was smaller than most orcs he had seen in his 30 years, built lean rather than broad, with green skin that caught the early light and small tusks that barely showed past her lips when she spoke. "I need work," she said, not asking, just stating a fact to the air between them. Yoren set down his chisel and studied her. She wore travel-worn clothes and carried a pack that looked like it had seen a dozen villages before this one. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and her pointed ears twitched slightly in the cold. "Can you haul?" he asked. "I can." "Then talk to Brendan by the carts. He pays by the day." She nodded once and turned away, and that should have been the end of it. Yoren went back to his stone, marking the grain, finding the places where his tools could split the granite clean. He had been cutting stone since he was 15, and the work had made him silent. Words felt clumsy compared to the precision of a well-placed wedge, the satisfaction of stone falling away in exactly the shape you intended. But the orc girl, whose name he learned was Sera Rothgar, worked the quarry for 3 weeks before anything strange happened. She hauled cut blocks to the carts, helped set scaffolding, fetched water and tools, and never complained. Some of the other workers muttered, because orcs were not common this far into human territory, but Brendan cared more about strong backs than green skin, and Sera had both strength and an odd sort of precision in how she moved, like someone who had learned to be useful in many places. The strange thing happened on a cold afternoon when Yoren was finishing a column order for the new bridge downriver. His hands were numb despite his gloves, and when he finally set down his tools and stretched, his back protested. He had been bent over the stone for hours. Sera walked past with an empty cart, then paused. She looked at him for a long moment, her dark eyes unreadable. "You are cold," she said. "I am fine." "You are not. Your hands are shaking." He looked down. She was right. He flexed his fingers, trying to work warmth back into them. "Come here," she said, and before he could respond, she had stepped close and wrapped her arms around him, pulling him into a hug that was startling in its suddenness and its warmth. She was shorter than him by half a head, but solid, and heat radiated from her like a banked fire. Yoren stood very still, unsure what to do with his hands, with the unexpected closeness of another person. He had lived alone for 5 years, since his mother passed. Touch was not something that happened to him anymore. After perhaps 10 seconds, Sera stepped back. She tilted her head, considering him with the same serious expression she used when checking if a block was square. "Adequate," she announced. "What?" "Your hug. I would rate it adequate. You did not push me away, but you also did not participate. 3 out of 5 stars. Then she picked up the cart handles and walked away, leaving Yoren standing in the stone dust, baffled and oddly warm. That night in his small house at the edge of the village, Yoren could not stop thinking about it. The hug. The rating. The clinical way she had delivered her assessment, as if she were evaluating masonry instead of human contact. It should have been ridiculous. It was ridiculous. And yet he found himself wondering what would have earned 4 stars, or 5. 3 weeks later, Sera was still working the quarry, and Yoren had learned a few things about her. She was 19 years old. She traveled with a small clan of orcs who moved through the borderlands doing seasonal work, harvest and hauling and anything else that paid. They would stay in the quarry village through winter, then move on when the roads cleared in spring. She had no parents. They had died when she was young in a rockslide in another quarry far to the south. She had been raised collectively by the clan, passed between families, never quite settling. He learned these things because she talked while she worked, not to him specifically, but to whoever was nearby. She had a way of stating facts about her life with the same neutral tone she might use to describe the weather. The second hug happened because Yoren made it happen. He did not plan it exactly, but when Sera walked past his cutting station at the end of a long day, and he saw her rubbing her shoulder where a rope had dug in during a difficult haul, he stood up and said, "Come here." She looked at him, curious. "You were right," he said. "The first one was inadequate. I would like to try again." A smile flickered at the corner of her mouth, barely there but real. She stepped close, and this time Yoren did not freeze. He wrapped his arms around her carefully, aware of his own strength, aware that she was tired and possibly sore. He held her gently, like something valuable, and after a moment she relaxed against him, her head tucking against his shoulder. They stood like that for perhaps 30 seconds, long enough for Yoren to notice the smell of stone dust in her hair, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the way she fit against him like a piece he had not known was missing. When she stepped back, her expression was thoughtful. "Improved," she said. 4 out of 5 stars. You participated, you even initiated, but there is room for refinement." "What would earn 5 stars?" he asked. "I do not know yet. That is why I am conducting research." And then she walked away again, and Yoren stood there feeling like he had been given a puzzle made of warmth and skin and unspoken rules he desperately wanted to learn. The research continued. Every few days, sometimes more often, Sera would appear and either request a hug or simply announce it was time for data collection. Yoren learned to read the signs. The way she would linger near his station at the end of the day, the slight tilt of her head when she was considering whether enough time had passed since the last sample. "Consistency is important," she explained once. "I need multiple measurements to identify patterns." "Of course," Yoren said, solemn as a judge, and opened his arms. The ratings crept upward. 4.5 stars when he rested his cheek against her hair without being prompted. 4.7 when he did not immediately let go, but instead waited for her to decide when the hug was finished. 4.8 when he rubbed her back in small circles, the way his mother used to do when he was young and frightened by storms. He was falling in love. He knew it the way he knew when a stone was about to split true, a certainty that lived in his bones before his mind caught up. He did not tell her. How could he explain that these brief moments of contact had become the center of his days? That he thought about her constantly, planned small kindnesses, looked for excuses to be near her. She had framed their exchanges as research, clinical and safe, and he did not want to break the spell by asking for more than she was willing to give. Winter deepened. Snow came to the quarry, and the work slowed. Yoren took contracts for indoor projects, carving mantels and lintels for the wealthier families in the village. Sera shifted to helping at the tavern, hauling barrels and stacking firewood. They saw each other less, and the research sessions became more precious for their rarity. One night in deep winter, Sera knocked on Yoren's door after dark. He opened it to find her standing in the snow, breath misting, her face unreadable. "I need a measurement," she said. "Now." Research does not respect convenient hours. He stepped aside and she came in, brushing snow from her shoulders. His house was small but warm, a single room with a hearth, a table, a bed in the corner. He had built all the furniture himself, simple and sturdy, shaped to fit his needs and no one else's. Sera looked around with interest. "You live alone?" "Yes." "That must be quiet." "It is." She turned to face him, and something in her expression was different, uncertain perhaps. Vulnerable in a way she usually was not. "I have been thinking," she said slowly, "about the research." "Yes. I think I need to test a hypothesis." "What hypothesis?" that the quality of a hug is affected by context, location, time of day, privacy. This is a controlled environment. No stone dust, no observers, no time pressure. We should collect data here. Yoren's heart was beating faster, but he kept his face calm. That sounds scientifically sound. I am glad you agree. She stepped close, and he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her in carefully, the way he always did. But this time she pressed closer, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, her face turning into his neck. This time the hug felt less like an experiment and more like a confession. They stood together by the fire, not speaking, just breathing in the same small space. Yoren lost track of time. It might have been minutes. It might have been longer. When Sera finally pulled back, her eyes were bright, and he realized with a shock that she might be close to crying. 5 stars, she whispered. Full marks. Perfect score. Sera, he started, but she shook her head. I have to go, I have to think. This data is very significant and I need to analyze it properly. She left before he could say anything else, slipping out into the snow, and Yoren stood by the fire alone, wondering what he had done wrong. She did not come back for 3 days. When he saw her again, it was at the tavern. She was hauling crates from the cellar, and she looked tired. He waited until she set the crate down, then approached carefully, the way he might approach a spooked horse. Sera, he said, can we talk? I am working. After work, then. She looked at him, and her expression was guarded. What do we have to talk about? The research, the data. Whatever is happening between us. Nothing is happening between us. I am collecting information for personal understanding. That is all. Is it? She picked up another crate, her movements jerky. Yes, what else would it be? I do not know, you tell me. There is nothing to tell. I am orc, you are human. I will be leaving in spring. This is temporary. The words hit him like a hammer. Of course she was leaving. She had said as much when she arrived. Her clan moved with the seasons. He had just allowed himself to forget, to imagine that maybe she would choose to stay, that maybe what they had was worth changing her plans for. Right, he said quietly. Temporary. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something cracked in her carefully neutral expression. Yoren, I cannot, it is fine, he said, cutting her off before she could finish. I understand. The research continues until you leave. I can work with that. He walked away before she could respond, out into the cold afternoon, and tried to convince himself that he meant it. But the research did not continue. Sera stopped requesting hugs. She stopped lingering by his cutting station. When they passed each other in the village, she nodded politely and kept walking. Yoren told himself it was better this way, cleaner, less painful in the long run. He was lying. It was agony. A week passed. Then 2. Yoren worked longer hours, took every commission he could get, anything to keep his hands busy and his mind occupied. He cut stone with grim determination, shaping blocks and columns and decorative pieces with relentless precision. If he worked hard enough, maybe he could stop thinking about the feel of her in his arms, the warmth of her pressed against him, the small smile she tried to hide when he did something unexpectedly gentle. The snow began to melt. Spring was coming early. The clan would be leaving soon. On a gray afternoon when rain threatened, Brendan found Yoren at the quarry and said, "That orc girl is looking for you." Yoren's hands went still on his tools. Where? Down by the old cutting site. She seemed upset. Yoren left immediately, walking fast through the muddy paths between stone piles and equipment sheds. He found Sera sitting on a low wall, staring at nothing, her shoulders hunched. When she heard him approach, she did not turn around. "I lied to you," she said. He stopped a few feet away. "About what?" "The research, the ratings, all of it." Her voice was tight, controlled, but he could hear the strain underneath. It was not research, it was cowardice. "I do not understand." She turned to face him then, and her eyes were red. She had been crying. The sight of it struck him like a blow. "My parents died when I was 7, she said. "Rock slide. They were working together and the whole face came down and they were just gone. I was in the camp. I heard the sound, and then people were running, and then someone was holding me back, telling me I could not go see, could not help. And then they were dead and I was alone." Yoren sat down beside her on the wall, careful not to touch her, waiting. "The clan took me in," she continued. "They were kind, but I moved between families. I was always temporary, always the extra child, the one who was not quite a full member of any household. I learned to be useful so people would keep me. I learned not to get too attached because I would just be moved again eventually. Sera. And then I got older and I decided that being alone was better than being temporary, so I kept everyone at arm's length. I was friendly but not close, helpful but not vulnerable, and it worked. It was easier." She took a shaky breath. "And then you gave me a hug, and it was the first time in years that anyone had touched me with gentleness instead of just utility. And it terrified me. So I made it research. I made it a game, something I could control, something that had rules and boundaries and a clear framework. If it was research, I did not have to admit that I needed it, that I needed you." Yoren's throat was tight. He reached out slowly and took her hand, and she gripped it hard. "I lied," she said again. "The ratings were nonsense. Every single hug was perfect. Every single one made me feel safe and wanted and less alone, and I could not admit that because admitting it meant admitting I would lose it when I left. And I have to leave. The clan is my family. I cannot just abandon them. Then I will come with you." The words were out before he fully thought them through, but as soon as he said them, he knew they were right. Sera stared at him. "What? I will come with you. I am a stonemason. Every village needs stonework. I can travel, take jobs wherever the clan goes. It will not be the same as having a permanent shop, but I do not need that. I just need you. Yoren, you cannot just leave your life behind for me. Why not? What am I leaving? A house I built for one, contracts I can find anywhere. This village is not my home. You are." She was crying now, fully crying, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her while she shook. This was not a research hug. This was not a game. This was two people trying to keep each other from falling apart. "I am afraid," she whispered against his chest. "I am so afraid of needing you and then losing you." "You will not lose me. I am not going anywhere. You promise." "I promise." They sat together until the rain started, and then they walked back to the village hand in hand. And Yoren felt like he had finally found the right grain in the stone, the line that would let everything fall into place. The clan elders were skeptical at first. A human traveling with them was unusual, and some worried about drawing hostile attention. But Yoren met with them and explained his skills, showed them examples of his work, made it clear he could earn his keep and then some. And Sera stood beside him, her chin lifted, daring anyone to suggest she could not choose her own path. In the end, they agreed. Yoren had 2 weeks to settle his affairs. He sold his tools to another mason for a fair price, then bought a smaller traveling set. He arranged for his house to be rented out, the income to be collected by Brendan and held for whenever he might return. He said his goodbyes to the few people in the village he considered friends, and they shook his hand and wished him well, and some of them looked at him like he was insane, but that was fine. Sera helped him pack. They worked together in his small house, sorting through his possessions, deciding what could be carried and what had to be left behind. It should have been sad, dismantling his life like this, but instead Yoren felt lighter with every box they closed, every item they gave away. "You regret it?" Sera asked on the last night when the house was nearly empty and they sat by the fire with mugs of tea. "No," he said simply. Do you? I did not give up anything. You gave up your distance, your armor. She looked at him over her mug, her expression soft. That is true, I did. She paused, then added, I should collect one more data point before we leave this place. Research, always. She set down her mug and came to him, and he stood to meet her. And this time when they embraced it was with the full weight of everything they had said and everything they had decided. Yoren held her like she was the most precious thing he had ever shaped, and Sera held him back with equal fierceness, and neither of them was hiding any more. Rating? He asked after a long time, his voice rough. Infinite stars, she said. The scale has been broken. I need to develop a new methodology. Take your time. I am not going anywhere, she laughed, and it was the best sound he had ever heard. They left with the clan on a cool spring morning when the first flowers were starting to push up through the wet ground. 15 orcs, 1 human, 2 carts and enough supplies for a month on the road. Yoren walked beside Sera, his traveling pack on his back, and felt absolutely no doubt about what he was doing. The first village they reached was a farming settlement that needed repairs on their granary. Yoren assessed the work, gave them a fair estimate, and set to cutting and shaping the necessary stones. Sera worked beside him, learning to mix mortar, helping to set the blocks, her hands growing more skilled with each day. When the work was done, the farmers paid well and offered them a bonus if they would stay for another week to fix their well. They stayed. And then they moved on. And then there was another village, another project. A bridge that needed reinforcement. A mill that needed a new foundation. A wealthy landowner who wanted decorative stonework for his manor. Yoren took the jobs that interested him, turned down the ones that did not, and slowly built a reputation as a traveling mason who did excellent work and asked fair prices. The clan accepted him. It took time, but gradually the wariness faded and he became simply Yoren, the human who traveled with them, who could fix things and lift heavy loads and tell surprisingly good stories around the fire at night. He learned orc customs, their songs, their way of dividing labor and making decisions collectively. It was different from human life, but not worse. Just different. And every night, wherever they camped, Sera would find him and request her hug. It became their ritual, the constant in the midst of travel and change. Sometimes it was brief, a quick embrace before sleep. Sometimes they would stand together for long minutes, just holding each other, not speaking. The research continued, she insisted, even though they both knew it was not research anymore. It was love. A year passed. Then two. The clan traveled a wide circuit through the borderlands, following the work seasons, and Yoren traveled with them. He learned which regions needed stone in spring, which in fall. He learned to work fast, to set up and break down his tools efficiently, to judge a job by eye and estimate cost and time with increasing accuracy. His skills sharpened. His reputation grew. In the 3rd year, in a village near the southern mountains, Yoren met an old mason who was retiring and wanted to sell his tools and his stock of cut stone. Yoren bought everything with the money he had saved, and then he had an idea. I want to build something, he told Sera that night. What? A house. Not here, but somewhere on the clan's route, a place we could return to, a home base. Sera was quiet for a long moment. The clan does not settle. I know. But we could have a place that is ours, that we come back to between travels. Other families in the clan have homes they return to sometimes. I asked the elders. It is allowed. Where would we build it? I have been thinking about that. There is a spot near the quarry village, but not in it. A few miles outside on the trade road. Good stone nearby, good water. We pass through that region twice a year. We could build there, spend a month or two each time, and then travel with the clan the rest of the year. Sera considered this. "A home," she said slowly, testing the word. "Our home, if you want it." "I want it," she said, and then she smiled, and Yoren knew he had made the right choice. They broke ground in the spring of the 4th year. The spot Yoren had chosen was perfect. A small hill with good drainage, a stream nearby, and a rock outcropping that could provide building material. He marked the foundation, cut the stones himself, laid them with the precision of 15 years' experience. Sera worked beside him, learning to judge a level line, to mix the right consistency of mortar, to see the structure taking shape from the ground up. The clan stayed nearby for a month while Yoren worked, taking other jobs in the region but returning to the building site each night. Slowly, the house rose. 4 walls, a hearth, a solid roof of slate tiles, 2 rooms, one for living and one for sleeping, windows facing south for light. A workshop space for Yoren's tools. It was modest, but it was sturdy and it was theirs. On the day they finished, Sera walked through the empty rooms, running her hand over the stone walls, testing the doors, looking at everything with an expression Yoren could not quite read. "What do you think?" he asked, nervous despite himself. "It is perfect," she said, "but it feels incomplete." "What is missing?" She turned to him, and there was mischief in her eyes. "Research data. I have not yet tested the hug quality in this specific location. This is a critical oversight. We should fix that immediately. For science. For science." She came to him, and he wrapped his arms around her in their new home, and it felt exactly right. The stone walls that he had cut and placed, the hearth that he had built, the woman he loved pressed close, safe and warm in his. "Rating?" he asked. "Perfect," she said. "But I think we need to collect more data, years more, possibly decades. I can commit to that timeline." "Good. Then I have a proposal." She pulled back just enough to look at him, her expression suddenly serious. "Marry me." Yoren's mind went blank. "What? Marry me?" "I know it is not common for orcs and humans, and I know some people will not approve, but I do not care. I want to be your wife. I want this to be permanent. I want to stop pretending this is temporary research and admit that it is forever." "Yes," Yoren said, and his voice cracked. "Yes, but I should be the one asking you. I should have a speech prepared. You built me a house, that is speech enough. Then yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in the summer, in a small ceremony with the clan as witnesses. An orc elder performed the ritual, binding their hands together with cord and speaking the words that made them officially one family. Some of the humans in the nearest village muttered when they heard, and a few refused to trade with them for a while, but most people did not care as much as Yoren had feared. A marriage was a marriage. Love was love, and anyone who saw them together could see they belonged to each other. The 5th year was hard. Sera's best friend in the clan, an older orc woman named Mara who had been like a mother to her, fell sick with a wasting illness. They stayed near a village with a skilled healer for 3 months, caring for Mara, but in the end she died quietly in her sleep, and Sera grieved like a hole had been torn through her chest. Yoren held her through the worst of it, night after night, saying nothing because there was nothing to say, just being there. "I am glad I have you," Sera said one night, her voice hoarse from crying. "I do not think I could survive this alone. You are not alone. You will never be alone again." "Promise?" "I promise." The 6th year was better. Sera recovered from her grief slowly, and they threw themselves into work. Yoren took a major commission building a memorial wall for a village that had lost people to a harsh winter, and he poured everything into it, creating something beautiful and lasting. Sera helped, and together they carved names into the stone, dozens of names, each one a person who had mattered. When it was finished, the village held a ceremony, and people wept openly as they touched the names of their loved ones. and Yoren felt the weight of the work, the responsibility of creating something that would outlast him, that would hold memory and meaning for generations. "You are good at this," Sera said that night, "building things that matter. I learned from you. You taught me that everything we do can matter if we choose to care." "Did I?" "Yes. The hugs, the research, all of it. You taught me to pay attention, to be careful with what I touch, to treat people like they are worth the effort." She kissed him then, long and sweet, and they went home to their small house and made love by the fire. And Yoren thought that this was what it meant to build a life. In the 7th year, Sera got pregnant. They were camped near a western settlement when she started feeling sick in the mornings, and at first they thought it was bad food, but then her monthly bleeding stopped, and an orc midwife in the clan confirmed it. "You are having a baby," the midwife said, smiling. "Congratulations." Yoren's hands went numb. A baby. A child. The idea was so enormous he could not fit it into his mind all at once. Sera looked at him, and he saw his own shock mirrored in her face. They had not planned this. They had not even discussed it, but as the shock faded, something else took its place. Joy, pure, terrified joy. "We are having a baby," Sera said, testing the words. "We are having a baby," Yoren repeated. "I do not know how to be a mother. I do not know how to be a father. I suppose we will learn together. I suppose we will." They went back to their house to prepare. Yoren built a cradle from smooth pine, carved with careful patterns of leaves and vines. Sera sewed blankets and tiny clothes, her stitches precise and determined. The clan gathered supplies, offering advice and reassurance. The midwife checked on Sera regularly, monitoring the baby's growth, teaching her what to expect. Yoren was terrified. What if he failed? What if he could not protect this child, could not provide enough, could not be the father his own father had been? His father had died when Yoren was 12, a falling tree at the logging site, and Yoren still remembered the sudden absence, the way the world had felt colder without him. "You will be a good father," Sera said one night, reading his thoughts. "I know you will." "How do you know?" "Because you are already careful with everything you care about. You will be careful with our child." "What if I break them?" "Children are stronger than you think. And we will not be alone. The clan will help. We will figure it out." The baby came in late winter, on a cold, clear night when the stars were sharp overhead. The labor was long and difficult, and Yoren sat outside the room where Sera labored, listening to her cry out, feeling utterly useless. The midwife had barred him from the room, saying he would only be in the way, so he waited with the other men of the clan and tried not to imagine everything that could go wrong. Finally, hours later, the midwife emerged and said, "You have a daughter. Both are well." Yoren stumbled into the room. Sera was propped up in bed, exhausted and sweaty, her hair sticking to her face. And in her arms was a tiny bundle, a baby with green skin just a shade lighter than Sera's, and small nub tusks and perfect tiny fingers that gripped at nothing. "Her name is Freya," Sera said, her voice rough. "I decided while I was pushing her out. Freya Caldwell." Yoren sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the baby in awe. "She is perfect, she is. Do you want to hold her?" He did, but he was afraid. His hands were so large, so rough from years of stone. But Sera placed the baby in his arms, showing him how to support her head, and Yoren looked down at his daughter and felt something crack open in his chest. "Hello, Freya," he whispered. "I am your father. I promise I will do my best." The baby made a small noise, and Sera laughed weakly. "She is rating your first hug as her father. Probably adequate. I will improve. I know you will." Freya was a calm baby, surprisingly so. She cried when she needed something but settled quickly once it was provided. She watched the world with serious dark eyes, and Yoren was convinced she was studying everything, collecting data like her mother. Life became a rhythm of feeding and changing and soothing. Yoren worked less that year, staying close to home, taking only small jobs nearby. Sera recovered slowly from the birth, her strength returning week by week. The clan helped as they always did, with different women coming by to check on the baby, offer advice, hold Freya so Sera could rest. "I worried I would not know how to love her," Sera confessed one night, nursing Freya by the fire. "I worried I would be too broken from my own childhood." "You are not broken." "I was, but I think you helped put me back together." "You did the same for me." Freya grew. She learned to smile, to laugh, to reach for things. Yoren made her toys from wood and stone, smooth shapes that she could grasp and mouth safely. Sera sang to her, orc lullabies and human songs she had learned from Yoren. The house filled with the sounds of a baby, crying and cooing and babbling, and it felt more like a home than any place Yoren had ever lived. When Freya was 6 months old, they rejoined the clan's travels. It was harder with a baby, but not impossible. Freya rode in a sling against Sera's chest, watching the world pass by with wide eyes. At night, she slept in her cradle by their bedroll, and Yoren would wake to check on her, making sure she was still breathing, still safe. "You are going to exhaust yourself," Sera said after the 5th night in a row that he woke her with his checking. "I cannot help it. What if something happens? Then we will handle it. But you cannot spend every night afraid. She is fine. Look at her. She is fine." Freya was indeed fine, sleeping peacefully, her small fist curled near her mouth. Yoren lay back down and Sera curled against him, and he thought that maybe she was right. Maybe he could let go of some of the fear. 2 years later, Sera was pregnant again. This time they were less shocked, more prepared. Yoren built a second, smaller bed for Freya, who was now a walking, talking toddler with her mother's determination and her father's quiet focus. Freya was fascinated by the idea of a sibling, asking endless questions about where babies came from and whether the new one would play with her. "Yes, the baby will play with you," Sera said patiently for the 10th time. "But not right away. Babies are very small and can only lie around for a while." "That sounds boring," Freya pronounced. "It is a bit boring," Sera agreed, "but they get more interesting as they grow." The second baby, a girl they named Tessa, was born in the summer, and she was nothing like Freya. Where Freya had been calm, Tessa was loud. Where Freya had watched the world, Tessa demanded it attend to her. She was a colicky baby, crying for hours despite every attempt to soothe her, and Yoren walked miles in the night, bouncing her against his shoulder, singing every song he knew, desperate for her to sleep. "I think she is broken," he said one morning after a particularly bad night. "She is not broken," Sera said, taking Tessa from him. "She just has opinions, very loud opinions. Yes, she gets that from me." But Tessa did eventually settle, and by 6 months she was smiling more than crying, and by a year she was a whirlwind of energy, crawling everywhere, getting into everything, making Freya laugh with her antics. Yoren expanded the house, added another room then another, built beds and shelves and a larger table. The house grew with the family, stone by stone, year by year. In the 11th year of their marriage, Yoren was 41 and Sera was 30. Freya was 8 and Tessa was 6, and they were both helping with the work in their own ways. Freya liked to sort stones by size and shape, organizing everything with quiet intensity. Tessa liked to talk to customers, charming them with endless chatter and surprisingly good bargaining instincts. The clan was camped near a border village, and Yoren had just finished a major job building a defensive wall for a settlement that had been raided by bandits the previous year. The pay was good, and he was in a generous mood, So when Sera suggested they stay at their house for a full month instead of moving on immediately, he agreed. It was a good month. The weather was mild, the garden Sera had planted was thriving, and the girls spent their days playing in the stream and helping with chores. Yoren took the time to make repairs on the house, fixing loose tiles, reinforcing the door frames, all the small maintenance that got neglected during travel. One evening, after the girls were asleep, Yoren and Sera sat outside watching the stars. The air was warm and night birds called in the distance. "You ever regret it?" Sera asked. "Leaving the quarry village, traveling like this, not having a stable life?" Yoren looked at her. "Never, do you?" "No, but I wonder sometimes what you gave up." "I gave up being alone. I gave up a life that was safe and empty. I got you and the girls and a life that is full. That is a good trade." She leaned against him and he wrapped his arm around her. "I need to collect data," she said. "Now. Right now." She stood and pulled him to his feet, and they embraced under the stars, holding each other the way they had for 11 years, since that first awkward hug in the quarry. But it was not awkward anymore. It was practiced and perfect, a dance they both knew by heart. "Rating?" Yoren asked, because some traditions were worth keeping. "Still perfect," Sera said. "Always perfect. Even after all these years. Especially after all these years. The long-term data is extremely compelling." He laughed and kissed her, and they went inside to their bed, to the house he had built for her, and he thought that he was the luckiest man alive. The years continued. Freya grew tall and serious, apprenticing with Yoren, learning to cut stone with careful precision. Tessa grew loud and clever, deciding she wanted to be a trader, negotiating with merchants and learning to read contracts and calculate prices. Both girls were beautiful, green-skinned and strong, with their mother's tusks and their father's steady hands. In the 15th year of their marriage, Freya met a young orc man from another clan, a carver who worked in wood, and the two of them fell in love with the quiet certainty of people who recognized each other. Yoren walked his daughter to her wedding and gave her away with a full heart, and then he sat beside Sera and watched Freya promise herself to another person, and he cried because his baby was grown. "She will be happy," Sera said, squeezing his hand. "I know. It is just strange. She was just born." "When did she become an adult?" "While we were busy living." 2 years later, Tessa announced she was joining a trading company and would be traveling far beyond the clan's usual routes, into the eastern territories and possibly across the sea. Yoren tried to talk her out of it, worried about the dangers, but Tessa was determined, and in the end he had to let her go. "She is like you," Sera said after Tessa left. "She needs to build her own life, make her own choices. Is this how your clan elders felt when you decided to stay with me?" "Probably, but they let me go anyway, and I was better for it. I hope Tessa will be safe. She is smart and strong. She will be fine." And Tessa was fine. Letters came sporadically, wild tales of foreign markets and sea voyages and near disasters that she always managed to escape. Freya settled near them, building a home with her husband just a few miles away, and gave them 2 grandchildren, small half-orc babies who visited often and called Yoren grandfather in high, piping voices. In the 20th year of their marriage, Yoren was 50 and Sera was 39, and they were sitting by the fire in the house he had built, the same house that had grown and changed with them, added onto and repaired, and made comfortable with 2 decades of living. "I need more data," Sera announced. Yoren looked up from the piece of stone he was carving, a toy for his grandchildren. "You are still doing research, always. The study is ongoing. And what are you researching tonight? The long-term stability of hug quality over 2 decades. This is critical information." He set down his tools and stood, opening his arms. "Come here, then. Let us collect your data." She came to him, and they embraced by the fire, and Yoren marveled that it still felt as good as the first time, maybe better, weighted now with years of memory and trust and love. He knew the shape of her body against his, knew exactly how to hold her so she felt safe. She knew exactly how to rest her head against his chest, how to breathe in rhythm with him. "Rating?" he asked, because he always asked. "Perfect," she said, because she always said it. "Full marks. The research conclusively shows that your hugs have remained consistently perfect for 20 years. "Only 20, I thought it was longer. 20 years of marriage, 24 years since the research began. Has it really been that long? It has. I am thinking of publishing my findings." "Oh, yes." "I will title the paper, 'A Longitudinal Study of Hug Quality. How a Stonemason Achieved and Maintained Perfect Scores Through Consistent Application of Care and Attention Over a 24-Year Period.'" Yoren laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "That is a very long title." "It is a very important study. What are your conclusions? That I love you, that you love me, that we built something good together and it will last. Those are excellent conclusions. I thought so." They stood together a while longer, and then Sera pulled back and looked up at him. Her face had changed over the years, fine lines around her eyes and mouth, a few silver threads in her dark hair. She was more beautiful now than she had been at 19, weathered and strong and utterly his. "You remember the day we met?" she asked. "Of course." "You walked into the quarry like you owned it. I was terrified. I had been traveling for weeks, and the clan was running low on food, and I needed work desperately, but I learned long ago never to show fear. You hid it well. I have had a lot of practice. But with you, I do not have to hide anymore. That is the best thing about the last 20 years. I get to be fully myself, fear and love and everything in between, and you do not run away." "Why would I run away? You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though I tricked you into traveling with a nomadic orc clan and giving up your stable life. Especially because of that." She smiled, and he kissed her, and the fire crackled, and outside the wind stirred the trees, and everything was exactly as it should be. The years continued to pass as years do. Yoren and Sera grew older together, their hands more weathered, their movements slower, but their love unchanged. They traveled less as they aged, spending more months at their house, taking only local work. The clan still came through twice a year, and they would travel with them for a few weeks, but mostly they stayed home. Freya's children grew. Tessa came home for visits, always with new stories, new scars, new treasures from foreign lands. She never married, preferring her freedom, and Yoren accepted it because she was happy. In the 30th year of their marriage, Yoren was 60 and Sera was 49, and he woke one morning to find her already awake beside him, watching him with an expression he could not quite read. "What is it?" he asked. "I was just thinking," she said. "About the research. You are still thinking about that, always. I have been conducting this study for 34 years. That is a significant data set. And what do the data tell you? That I was right. That first hug in the quarry, the one I rated adequate, it was not adequate at all. It was perfect. They all were. I was just too afraid to admit it." "Why tell me now?" "Because I am not afraid anymore. Because 34 years is long enough to be certain. Because I want you to know that this research, this silly game I started to protect myself, it became the foundation of the best thing in my life." Yoren's throat was tight. He reached for her hand, and she laced her fingers through his. "I love you," he said. "I have loved you since the day you rated my hug adequate and walked away. I will love you until the day I die." "I know," she said. "I love you too, more than I have words for." They lay together in the morning light, in the bed they had shared for 3 decades, in the house he had built stone by stone, And Yoren thought about how strange life was, how a single moment could change everything. One hug, one orc girl with a rating system, one decision to stop being alone. "Come here," he said, and she shifted closer, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her the way he had held her thousands of times before, careful and sure and full of love. "Rating?" he asked, because some questions never got old. "Perfect," she said. "Always perfect." And outside, the sun rose over their small house on the hill, lighting the stone walls that Yoren had cut with his own hands, warming the garden Sera had planted and tended for decades, touching the worn path between the door and the workshop, the well, the gate. This was a place where two people had chosen each other against all odds, where they had built a life stone by stone and hug by hug, where their research had continued nightly for years, and had revealed a simple truth. That love, real love, was not something you could measure or rate or study from a safe distance. It was something you had to risk everything for, something you had to build deliberately and carefully, something that required showing up every single day and choosing each other again. Yoren and Sera had done that. They had chosen each other every day for 30 years of marriage, 34 years of hugs, and they would keep choosing each other until time ran out, collecting data and refining their findings and rating every embrace perfect, because when you found the right person, the one who made you better and stronger and less alone, every moment together was worth 5 stars, worth infinite stars, worth everything you had to give. The research would continue for the rest of their lives, and neither of them would ever want it to end. That was the final conclusion, the ultimate finding, that some questions were worth asking forever, and some studies were too precious to ever complete. And so they held each other in the morning light, in the house they had built together, surrounded by the life they had made. And the rating was perfect, and it would always be perfect, because they had learned the secret that no amount of research could have taught them. That love was not something you measured, but something you lived, one careful embrace at a time.